right, here we are. I am lucky enough to have Tom Mcmullen with us today. Tom is at Korn Ferry. How it goes?
Hey, Sean, good to be with you. It's going well.
Good. All right. So instead of me butchering things, usually the way I have this do is have you do your elevator pitch of your career, and you take however many stories you need in your elevator, which may, depending on how long you've been around, be taller than some others. I'll just leave it at that.
All right, we'll see if it's taller than a duplex. All right, so I'm a client partner at Korn Ferry. I've been with Korn Ferry since they acquired the organization I was with, Hay Group. Combination of those two firms for a few decades. I started in the as a reward consultant ever since I got out of college. Was in practitioner roles for a few years. Worked for a big quick service restaurant chain and a healthcare organization. Followed a boss up to Hay Group in Cincinnati. Worked in a couple of different cities. I tend to help clients, usually larger clients across a range of industry sectors, in broad-based reward strategy, base variable pay design, performance management, linkages, and such. I also lead our U.S. pay equity practice.
Okay. But that's not too many stories.
No, it's
And I'll put the plug in. I'll put the plug in. Tom's pretty kicking. So Tom, over the years, has come up in multiple places. So we've crossed paths, all in good ways. And so I'm pretty stoked today to get some of your insights. Before we get to the serious stuff, I ask everyone, what do because in theory, people have lives outside of work. What do you do for fun or like to do outside of work?
Let's see. I like to travel. I'm now in the process of trying to draw down my frequent flyer miles. Like to do that. I'm a big music fan, so during the pandemic, I kind of broadened my range of musical genres. So that's good. So go to some shows, and we've got two young adult kids. One's still in college, one's out, so we like visiting with them too.
Okay. That's kind of the box I have that says I'm not a robot. So that's how I make sure. Although I think AI is going further and further, pretty soon I could be duped pretty easy. So let's dive in. So basically picking on all your expertise around pay equity, transparency. I've got a couple of questions I want to jam on with you, but if you could help level set and I've kind of been asking this of a couple of people, define what you see as pay equity versus pay transparency. It'll also help me stay, even on the discussion.
Yeah, they're definitely related. I think they're strong first cousins. I typically say, you know, pay equity is around reducing or having more of a level playing field for individuals, no matter what their background is, right? So a lot of the pay equity laws in the U.S. started, I'd say 2016, 2018, when a lot of the U.S. states, saying that they probably wouldn't get action at a federal level, started tightening up what state pay equity meant. So a lot of characteristics were broadening the statute of limitations to bring a suit, more burden of proof on employers rather than employees, new definitions of what protected classes are. We saw some states rolling out, banning the compensation history question during applicant interviews. Now we're seeing some of the salary range transparency pieces coming out. So some mandatory reporting on pay equity at the state level. So I think all of this is intended to reduce pay gaps for individuals and groups. So gender, race, other protected groups. I think that's the main intent on pay equity and what some of these laws are. But laws don't happen in a vacuum. They're a result of societal pressure, right? So things like Me Too movement, George Floyd, some of the media reports of differences in wages between Hollywood actors and actresses, the men's and the women's soccer teams, and so forth. So that societal pressure, I think, has put pressure on the regulatory environment, which is hitting business now. But I think a lot of CEOs and business leaders see that this is also the right thing to do. That, to have better organization performance, you need better engaged employees. Employees are more engaged if they feel that they've been treated equitably. Companies with more diverse leadership groups, or studies show that they tend to be more effective, and so on and so on. So there's good internal reasons in addition to the external factors that are causing this. I would say the pay transparency stuff is an extension of that, right? So I think pay transparency, primarily within what we're seeing in the U.S. on the salary ranges, is again an attempt to level the playing field. That one of the key reasons for internal equity issues is individuals being brought in at different hiring rates. So if the hiring rates are known up front, that should theoretically kind of converge any variation that may be due to discretionary factors. So I think that is the intent, is to level the playing field. It's like going in, can you imagine buying a new car if you didn't know what the sticker price is? To me, this is a very comparable analogy. Now people are willing to, hey, I'm willing to bid on being an applicant for this job, but I want to know kind of what the ballpark range is. Right now, a lot of applicants don't have that. And is that right? I think for a more efficient labor market, you probably should know what the price of the car and the price of the job is, right? So that'll save up a lot of wasted time from applicants applying and from managers finding a great candidate only to find out that their salary expectations were much higher than what the job was paying. So I think transparency in general is a good thing, but I think it's also a painful thing for a lot of organizations to deal with, to get that set up.
I think we can talk maybe for another day, but I think, to me, the external piece is pretty easy. The internal piece is the one that I think is a little trickier in the communication, right? So at what point do you basically show where everyone else in your department's making how much, even if they're just dots on a grid? That piece of transparency, because you're getting a small piece of the transparency with the external, because you have some semblance of what the new person makes. But actually, oh my gosh, they make more than me, or that job is posted significantly higher than what I'm making. And actually, how do I compare to my peers?
Yeah, and I mean, the term pay transparency can mean there's not a universal definition, right? So some people will immediately say, well, wait a minute, does that mean Tom's going to know how much Sean makes? No, but I think when people hear that, a lot of people jump to that conclusion. No, it would be chaos if everybody in our organization knew what everybody else makes. I mean, that is the case in, governmental organizations, state universities, and the like, but in most, I would say 98% of private companies, that's not the case. So, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a range of opportunities. A side of the barn. Does this job pay 80 to 120,000, or is it 200 to 240,000? It's that order of magnitude. But I think it does raise questions on having some explanation about why is this job have a higher hiring rate than that job, and being able to explain that to people. Or in all of these laws that are passed, it's not just, I think the initial intent was to have a level playing field for applicants, but all of these states, New York, California, Washington, and the like, these laws also apply to people already inside the organization. So, you're posting it both for the external audience and the internal audience. And if you're posting an $80,000 to $120,000 range, and I'm making $85,000, and I've been an outstanding rated employee for 5 years, hey boss, why am I paid so low in range? Why can somebody earn up to 120 when you're only paying me 85? Is the boss able to answer that question? I mean, does the boss even know where to start to answer that question? And I'm sad to say, in a lot of organizations, they're not equipped to answer those questions. And I see a lot of organizations scrambling to go there now to, shore up you can't communicate anything until you have something to communicate, right? So if everything's let's make a deal and, we trust our managers to make the right hiring decisions, that's a slipperier slope than, having more codified principles and frameworks that are known and understood in the organization.
So let me kind of pivot then and say, since you've worked with so many clients and have that unique perspective, which is why I want you on, kind of however you want to tackle this, kind of give me the good, the bad, and even the ugly on how you're seeing organizations both, identify the issue, talk about a solution, and then potentially remediate.
Yeah. So I think the good around pay equity is that there's clearly momentum on this, right? So I think companies really started getting serious about this maybe 8 to 10 years ago. And we're seeing organizations that have gone through a couple of cycles of taking a look, a good structured look at pay equity outcomes and remediating issues as they need to. So great traction, especially over the last 10 years or so. But our data, other data sources suggest that there's only about 2/3 of the organizations out there that have taken action. So there's still a sizable chunk of companies out there that have not really done anything formal. What we have found is that the larger companies, the multinationals, the publicly held organizations are further ahead of that curve. So they've got a higher percentage than 2/3 that are there. The ones that are a bit behind the eight ball tend to be the smaller, mid-sized companies, privately held, family-owned companies that they're still either not there or they're starting to kind of chip away at it. I think the other thing I would say that is that's been good happening is that for the companies looking at pay equity, I would say when this started, the initial focus was on doing a statistical assessment. Do we have statistically significant differences in pay between gender groups, between race groups in this country? Outside the U.S., the focus is primarily on gender just because race and ethnicity groups are not consistently defined. And in a lot of countries, that data on race and ethnicity is not even tracked in the HRIS. If it is tracked, a lot of times it's volunteer reporting. So being able to analyze that is more than challenging. But I think the broadening of the remit, going beyond the statistical look and looking at what we would call more pay drivers analysis, is we've seen that trend happening. So in addition to looking at the outcome of pay, well, if we've done these analyses and we've historically seen the same gender or race group tracking less than the peer group, why is that? Do we have differences in performance rating distributions? Is our talent flow different? Is our rate of intake of these employees or exits of these employees or rate of promotion different, and why might they be different? We're starting to see more organizations taking a look at off-cycle increases, where things are a bit more fuzzier, more discretion. Who's eligible for promotion? So the rates of promotions, the amount of promotions, exception increases, off-cycle increases. Who's getting the counter offers? So all of those, the slush money buckets that exist in organizations. A lot of companies don't have a disciplined look at looking at that. So we're starting to see them turn that corner and taking a more comprehensive approach to other aspects of pay management rather than just looking at, the aggregate base salary, the aggregate total cash amounts. We're looking at the drivers of that and different components of that. And then, where there are maybe loose guidelines. We see a lot of focus on promotion guidelines, hiring guidelines. We're seeing organizations get a little bit more structured in that, providing more boundaries or providing the right balance between freedom and framework to make those decisions. So I'd say that's all good.
Do you think, just real quick, when you said 2/3 are tackling this, if you bifurcate that into kind of two parts, and you alluded to some of it, are they tackling it just from kind of in-role pay equity, I'll call it, or are those same 2/3 also tackling the opportunity equity, which you hinted around promotions and other areas? Are those two separate buckets in your mind?
I would say yes, but they're strongly related. And it's interesting. The focus on U.S. pay equity has been primarily around the like for like pay analysis, right? So looking at multivariate regression, if we can look at two people that are similarly situated, do we have difference in the pay outcomes between the male and the female groups, or between the race and the ethnic groups? That has been the focus within the U.S., say for the last 10 years. The focus that we're seeing in Europe is more on the employment equity side. They will call that a gender pay gap analysis, but at the end of the day, that is more. So it's essentially like in the UK mandatory pay gap reporting. Any UK company that has over 250 employees is required to report median base cash, median bonuses between males and females. That's putting all males in a group, all females in a group, and comparing the difference. That is not a like for like analysis. That is an aggregated analysis that is more of a function on representation in job levels than where the U.S. is focused. So although both are, quote, pay gap analyses, one is much more about, in Europe, it's more about what can be done to get more representation of females in higher paying jobs, or, not just female, but it's typically the males are advantaged. But it's really about, how can a disadvantaged group close that gap? And it's usually about, better development opportunities, better feeder talent pools, rather than just pay management. It's really kind of career and talent acquisition and talent management processes that get you there.
Okay. And so if that's a lot of good, actually, and then I'm kind of stoked we spent that much time on good. To be honest, so I don't know if you want to put bad and ugly in the same group, but the not as good.
Okay, the not as good. So what about this 30 to 35%? If pay equity is a good thing, why aren't they there, right? So we asked that question. We said, look, what's stopping you from going there, from dipping your toes in a pay equity analysis? What we hear anecdotally from our clients, and we did a study on this with World Work a couple of years ago, it's the fear of the cost that is the number one thing in the eyes of the executive. I'd rather keep my head in the sand because I'm afraid, hey, it's all I can do to afford a 3% increase to payroll every year. What if this thing's another 3%? I just can't go there. So I'd rather not know, or, until I'm forced to do so by law, I'm not going to go there. So I see that mentality a lot.
Yeah, I think the ostrich mode, to me, I've kind of ranked these orders of, I know I have a problem and I'm fixing it. That's the best. And until there's legal ramifications, ostrich mode actually is in second place behind or ahead of, I know I have a problem. I just don't want to fix it. Like I'm admitting I have a problem. I'm just not going to address it for whatever reason. Ostrich mode looks better. I don't know, and I don't have to yet.
Yeah, it's like, delaying going to your doctor for a physical. Is that, short term? Yeah, that's good. Long term, it's not so good. Yeah. But I think for those organizations that are doing pay equity, I mean, there are still a lot of organizations out there. I'd say they tend to be smaller to mid-sized organizations that are doing very simple pay equity analysis. They're not using regressions. They're kind of looking, hey, how do our males versus females paid? Maybe we'll reduce that down on a grade basis. Maybe we'll look at R&D grade 4 jobs, males versus females. So they're getting it down, but they're not looking at a lot of variables simultaneously. What I've found when we've followed organizations, it's important to look at that data that way, because that's the way most people say, hey, do we kind of have an issue or not? It gives you good indications where you might have an issue. But organizations that use those simple high-level differences as a basis for pay remediation, I find that they're invariably paying too much. So if you have, say, a 5% delta between males and females, say, in your R&D group in a business unit, and the only things you're looking at are function and grade level, and then looking at pay there, and if you're missing time in company, time in job, performance, maybe geography, you are likely overpaying for that, because when you can include additional relevant variables, those pay differentials typically go down. So it's looking at it on a simple basis is better than nothing, but it's not as good as what it could be or should be, and you're likely over remediating.
So do you think the legal piece, and this is a little bit different how we're going, this is the piece I'm kind of interested in as we go forward. So the EU directive is more straight stats. I know the French allow, the multivariate regression, but if you just put it in the US and talk about what you're talking about, will the legal precedents allow multivariate regression to be a defense mechanism? It's not there yet. We're not there yet. But if you think about it, what you're basically saying is, yeah, I was supposed to stay within 5% or whatever it is, and I'm not, but here's why. And will anyone care that here's why? Piece. And so, and the other piece is obviously, I know you're a big, one of the things I was, get your perspective is multivariate regression. So I know you're a big proponent of it. I'm starting to see that. And so I know a lot of people on the other side are like, well, that's too complex. It's not needed. So so between all those things, and then why are there other reasons for multivariate? I think the one being you're going to over remediate is the obvious one.
Yeah, over remediating, being able to know if you have a statistically significant difference, you get that with multivariate regressions, and just the ability to handle multiple relevant variables simultaneously. You can't get that with simple descriptives. The fact that even though there is not an operating system or an absolute playbook that the court system looks at, most courts have generally, some have said, multivariate regressions are a gold standard. They are the highest standard. It's not to say that the courts are mandating it or the courts will automatically dismiss a simple statistical exercise. I mean, there's still a lot of latitude for organizations out there. My view is doing some analysis rather than no analysis is a great first step. And then if you want to tighten up your analysis, I think moving from some basic descriptive statistics and to the extent that you can nest them and boil them down, that's better than looking at just high level median comparisons. And then using a multivariate regression is better than that. And I think better than that is using multivariate regression in addition to other things like talent flow analyses, performance rating distribution. There's all kinds of goodies that you can supplement. But again, the courts haven't mandated thou shalt do it this way. Not all organizations aspire to be a best-in-class analytic organizations. Some say, hey, I just want to stay out of jail, or I want to be compliant with the laws of the land. That would require something less than, the high end of what we've described. So
well, I guess I'd push back. I mean, to stay out of jail, if courts allow as legal precedents multivariate regression, there are going to be types of companies who, to your point, stay out of jail, not get fined. That actually, because you've got long tenured people in the same role over long periods of time, that's going to allow you to defend your position fairly well. And so I don't know. I think there'll be two factions. There'll be those who want to do it right for all the right reasons, and they're just good humans, and others that use this because actually just the way their business runs in the industry they're in, it's going to help them defend why they have it. Otherwise, you're going to have the opposite problem, actually. Long tenured people in the same role asking why someone who's been there 2 years and who's female is getting paid the same when it's an experience-based thing. So I think both are driving at that in a good way. I think it's a good thing that people kind of go there.
Yeah. Well, they have to go there. It's interesting. What I've been finding over the last couple of years is quite often we get pulled into an organization where, HR, the executives, the board wants to know if there's any statistically significant differences between gender or race groups. But then once we get into the organization and start talking to the people on the ground in HR and in the business, what do you think their number one internal equity concern is?
You said it's probably gender. Is that not?
It's what you previously described. It's, hey, since the pandemic, we've been hiring in these hot shots that are much younger than some of these great performers that are 10, 15 years older, and we're leapfrogging them in pay. That's what we're seeing most business leaders concerned about is the compression with all this kind of hyper hiring activity that we did that is now kind of narrowing or again leapfrogging these folks.
Well, pay equity aside, that's always been the issue, right? The internal, whatever world at work number you use, all of those guys all buoy around 4%, and changing jobs is a 10% average. And so you do that math, and there's always going to be this issue. And I think this just makes it bigger over time.
Yeah, and at the end, this is really about internal equity, right? So we should do if we see kind of pay anomalies, whether it's by gender or race or age or how long you've been here, we want to fix that. So what we're hearing, in addition to the gender and the race, which kind of gets us in the door, we're increasingly hearing it's about how long these people have been here and how long good performers have been here, and if some of these people are paid much lower than where they should be relative to the norms, we need to correct that too. It may be somebody not in a disadvantaged group. Say if the organization had one group, say Hispanics paid 4%, statistically significant difference, 4% lower than the peer group. But then if there was a white female that was a significant outlier, most organizations would want to invest remediation in both cases. That, hey, we need to invest in bringing our Hispanic group as a whole closer to where there's no statistically significant difference. We want to close that -4 gap to something less, to where it doesn't get statistically significant. And if we've got anybody, I don't care what gender, what race they are, that is a significant outlier, and then we work with them to define what that means, is that we also want to kind of get them to a better place than where they are now, and do it in a systematic way.
So knowing, and maybe you found one, but I haven't found one yet, where companies remediate by paying the ones up higher less. It's a money add. What are the obstacles? So other than, money's the obvious one, right? This is how you solve the problem. So what are the obstacles keeping people from getting where they're going? So let's assume we highlight these things, we do all our analysis, we found the problems. What's keeping, is it the front end of the process keeping people from getting there? Or is it, now that I know I have a problem, how do I get there?
Yeah, again, I think it's the obstacles after fear of cost. I think there can be a mindset with the executive team that, hey, we pride ourselves in giving our leaders a high degree of autonomy and discretion in making their decisions. I don't necessarily want to put a heavy governance structure of HR or anybody else telling my leaders how they should be paying people. I think the pendulum definitely is swinging more towards this balance between freedom and framework. And the right spot is ultimately, what's the size of the playground that we can provide our hiring managers to get the right talent in the door? What is the right amount of variable discretion, but doesn't get us in hot water from either a legal or employee relations perspective or optics? If these pay rates hit the front page of my company newsletter, that people won't be in a revolt situation. So I think
you got to throw the quote I steal from you all the time. I've now made it. I use it all the time.
I think I know what unbridled management discretion is the enemy of pay equity. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely. The two big, that's number one. So organizations that give kind of a blank check to their organization, and this can be manifested in different ways. Weak to no HR governance, not much written down in terms of policies or frameworks. Is there a promotion guideline? Do we have hiring guidelines? These are kind of blank checks, right? Whether they're by design or that's just how we've happened. So, I think it's this perfect storm of having better clarified frameworks, making those transparent, and then, kind of at least a trust but verify approach that we're kind of following our own medicine. And I think that the other thing I would say is the whole job leveling process. A lot of tough internal equity issues are a result of this high level of discretion or maybe lack of proactive management on the job leveling side as well. So making sure that house is in order, and your governance house and your frameworks and your policies house, this all goes to getting that right balance between freedom and framework.
Well, and I think, I mean, a little bit self-serving, we're on the tech side, and what I've been kind of preaching to people is we can put that framework in deciles, 5% by pay for performance, create that guidance and framework, and then managers can have to go outside that discretion, and we can do a check to see if, there's people outliers based on whatever. That's all fine. And that's great because we can build really cool stuff, but you have to have the job leveling piece done. Are you comparing apples to apples? Is your data good? Or did you change, systems 3 years ago and everyone's longest tenure is 3 years? Well, now when you run your regression analysis, actually it's not going to be a good number set. If you're not, and with pay equity in my mind, the goal should be comparing not just apples versus oranges. It's not apples to apples. It's not even green apples to red apples. It's got to be like max to max and not max to gallows. You got to get it pretty tight down at the bottom with the data. And then I think the thing that's changed in my mind is we used to be dictated in what you could do with regret, all this stuff by the technology. And that's why people had kind of poor frameworks. Well, I can't push this out because how much Excel can I push out in 90 spreadsheets? Now the opposite is there. I think the opposite is you create a really good framework that can be put in place, but you have to think it through now and the ramifications of your framework. And you can't blame that technology couldn't let us get there.
I think you nailed it, Sean. I mean, we're sitting at a point where we've got the best technology that we've ever had. We've got more data than we've ever had. And I think the right answer is to embed these rule sets into a technology tool. It just, I don't know how you argue against that. So if a manager if I've got a budget of 4%, but I want to give Joe a 12% increase, I might be able to do that if I can live within my means. But maybe I shouldn't do that if Joe's already pretty darn well paid. And I mean, we're already seeing clients that have taken the modeling tools that they've used to assess internal equity to begin with and starting to embed them in hiring decisions. So, hey, I've got these characteristics for this incoming employee. Let me pop them into a model, and then let me compare that expected value to what the business is thinking about in terms of an offer. And is it sitting within a reasonable tolerance band? We're seeing organizations do the same thing with promotions and salary increases as well, right? So in addition to managers living within their means of that 4% budget, I think we're seeing organizations providing some boundaries on individual decisions based on their attributes. And again, then there's the question on, is this a control or a guideline? And I think organizations will vary in that spectrum. You should at least kind of flash it in yellow if I want to give that person a 12% when maybe I shouldn't.
But you can do that now. So, I mean, that's the cool part is you can set the framework, you can give management discretion, and then you can run reports to basically say, this female was a 4 under midpoint, and we gave them this increase, and Sean is obviously a poor performer and overpaid. Why'd he get a bigger increase? And you can flag those now. So the manager has discretion to do that. But I also think human nature, when you create those frameworks, people will be like, I don't know if I want to put in that box why I gave Sean more money. It'll start to police itself more than I think people think.
Yeah. And I think HR needs to, before we put all these decision rules in technology, all these decision rules need to be agreed in principle by the executive team. So rather, hey, Joe, I tried to give you the 12%, but the system wouldn't let me, right? Well, let's say HR wouldn't let me. No, it's our leadership team wouldn't let me, and they've had the opportunity to vet this and run these scenarios. Yes. This is a leadership decision, not a technology.
The last piece of that, kind of winding down on this before kind of the automagical question is, how important, because I know I have my piece of it, is we can solve the technology, put the framework, create the guidances, allow you to do all this, but the communication to what you just leaned into, how do companies, is that a stumbling block for companies? Because otherwise they'll just say it's HR's fault or I can't do it. how do you basically create that discussion, or how do companies, is it a hurdle for companies to put this in place? Because I now have to have the discussion that says, Sean, you're paid over median, all these things are in place. That's why your increase is less than someone else's increase.
Um, People spend a good chunk of their life at work, and we should treat people with respect and the adults that they are at work.
Yeah.
And I think that question, an appropriate answer to that question, is treating people with respect and as adults. So, yes, I think we need to have that discussion. Are a lot of organizations there? No. And if there was one, if I could wave my magic wand and change one thing about rewards in general, it would be about this communications and transparency space. And this has been an issue, not just because of things like salary range transparency. We did a study with World at Work, I think it was 25 years ago, one of our first studies. And we said, we polled probably at least 700 total rewards leaders. And we said, what is the number one differentiator for success or lack thereof in your rewards program? Communications, number one. Things haven't changed much over the past couple decades, which is a bit, confounding that communications is something entirely under the control of the organization, right? So, I mean, if we want to be real transparent, a little bit transparent, or totally opaque, that's our choice. We're not being forced by anybody, right? So for this to be, it makes sense to be like the number one differentiator, but I'm still a bit shocked that more companies haven't cracked the code and made inroads.
I guess I wouldn't debate that it's the number one issue. I think they used to be able to hide behind, we have other issues, technology and frameworks and data and other stuff. So obviously we can't communicate it well. But, I perpetually say, humans are statistically highly predictable, and individually amazingly unique. And so everything falls on a bell curve when you say we need to do this communication. But that's I also joke, I've never been a practitioner because that job sucks. That's the part of the job that sucks. And, giving somebody a lot of money, it's why I think peanut butter's like the peanut butter spread for merit. It's easy to go into everybody and say, hey, management or HR said we get 4%, y'all get 4%, which only perpetuates any pay equity issues. But that's easy. I don't have to go tell somebody that you're not doing a great job and you're already overpaid in a nicer way. And so you're getting a small increase. Like, that's the part I think is just the human part of human resources is why I would argue that's hard. But now it's becoming front and center because they can't hide because of equity and transparency. It's forcing this issue to come out.
Yeah, on the peanut butter pro, I once had a boss said, "Hey, don't the best compensation programs aren't the ones that maximize employee satisfaction. They're the ones that minimize employee dissatisfaction." Right. So that kind of plays to the peanut butter analogy. But I mean, you'll love this statistic. So I think it was a couple of years ago. World at Work, they do their compensation programs and practices survey. And they said that 80% of companies say that a majority of their employees do not understand the organization's compensation philosophy. Maybe the reason why that is because only 60% of companies have a documented compensation philosophy. So even the high level, this is what we are about pay, only a slight majority have it documented. Now, again, I think bigger multinationals, public health are in a better spot. But that's appalling. And then the other thing is, before the mandated salary range transparency laws, only 40% of organizations let employees know what their own salary range is. So if the law doesn't require me to tell you what your range is, a lot of organizations don't go there because if you're not forced, it's just easier to not poke the bear, not to go there.
Right.
And it provides a lot of organizations more flexibility. Hey, let me post a job, see what I get. Maybe I'll make the job a VP, a director, or manager based on the talent. Well, now you kind of can't do that as much because you got to post the job as something and then see what you get, right? I'll go back to the loose and inconsistent reward frameworks. It makes a lot of sense not to be transparent if you have a lot of management discretion, right? So on the one hand, you say, well, our view is to provide our leaders autonomy. So, but if you do that, you can't be transparent in your reward philosophies and your reward practices and principles. But at the end of the day, if pay is an important part of the employee-employer relationship, and we as employees spend a lot of our time, a lot of our life, doesn't the organization kind of have some accountability, some stewardship, at least to provide us what the rationale is on this stuff?
You would hope that's the piece. So, any last words of advice or anything before I let you off the hook?
I would say, if you're an organization leader, your employees will give you credit, and leader credibility will go up if you are proactive in this space, proactive in pay equity, proactive in pay transparency. Leaders and organizations get no credit if they're forced to do something by regulation. The regulations are coming down the track, and like what we saw with the banning of the compensation history question during interviews, I think 22, 25 states may have passed that law, but it's in effect the practice of the land and not the law of the land. I see the same thing going here with salary range transparency. More and more states are getting on board. All of the states aren't going to do this, but if you're competing across all 50 states, you will highly likely need to post your salary ranges across all 50 states, because some organizations, IBM, Microsoft, Starbucks, I think American Express, Deloitte, are already there. So if I'm weighing two offers and one's transparent in their range and the other one isn't, I'm probably predisposed to the one who's transparent. So again, I think if you haven't done anything, the time is now to prep and get ready for this, because it's coming soon to a theater near you.
Okay. Well, thanks for those that are, that tuned in or whatever you want to call it. We'll have Tom's information there. He's easy to find on LinkedIn as well. Thanks so much for coming by. I mean, I could spend hours talking. It's always good to jam out. And weirdly enough, we didn't spend like 20 minutes talking about regression methodology, which we would have.
Well, let's do that next time.
Yeah, that'll put everyone.
Everybody tunes in.
Yeah.